Hey guys, how's it going? Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Florida Mayhem preview. Oh, this is going to be a good one. So, Florida Mayhem. Florida Mayhem have done nothing but change in this off-season, so we've got a lot to get through, but without further ado, let's talk about where they have been in the past. So, in the inaugural season, Florida Mayhem, lived up to exactly what we thought they'd be, which was pretty bad initially, and they came 11th. They were only savoured the humiliation of being bottom because Shanghai Dragons failed to win a game. And then we moved on to the 2019 season, and we looked at the Florida Mayhem and we thought, well, this team really hasn't improved much. So, Florida Mayhem, they had a very different roster in the inaugural season with the likes of Tvik and Manatin and people like that. Kind of almost European roster, a lot of Swedish, a lot of interesting players, and it really didn't live up to what we thought it would be. So then, in the 2019 season, they kind of transferred to an all-Korean roster. Like, a lot of teams like to have an all-Korean roster because that's where the best players are, unfortunately. But some teams do manage to make non-all-Korean teams work. Isn't that right, San Francisco? Anyway, moving on, Florida Mayhem have stuck with that all-Korean roster going into the 2020 season, even though they did finish bottom of the league last year. There's no, sugarcoating it. They came bottom, minus 39 differential, only 6 wins in the whole season. It's not a good look. But what we did see from the Florida Mayhem is progress, because at the end of last season, in Stage 4, they did reach 6th place. Unfortunately, that didn't mean playoffs for the Florida Mayhem because there wasn't any playoffs in Stage 4. So that's unfortunate. But it's nice to see that they were improving, and that was mainly, I think, because of the new players they were kind of knitting into their roster. So let's go through this then. Their roster is a 9-man roster right now. We could see more signings for the Florida Mayhem coming before the league starts, but this is currently what we have. So, the most stable player for the Florida Mayhem is obviously Saya Player, the DPS player. He's been around, he is the longest serving Florida Mayhem player right now, and Saya Player, I've often argued, especially in near the end of the inaugural season and early this season, I've always argued like, damn, how has this guy not found a better team? Because Saya Player is a really good player. And then we have the support Chris, we have BQB, the DPS, and Fate in the tank role alongside Byram on the support role as well. Fate, obviously we know from Los Angeles Valiant in the past, Fate has the ability to be a really good player. So, they definitely got the players here. But then we have Gargoyle and Karayan. So, Gargoyle and Karayan, they came in towards the end of last season. And these two kind of, especially Gargoyle, who is an off-tank, made quite a big difference to the Florida Mayhem going towards the end of last season. Gargoyle did kind of carry the Mayhem through a few games at the end of last season, and it was interesting to watch, and we saw a lot of potential in these two. So, very interesting, and it's definitely looking like they're setting up for a tank line that I think will have Fate at the main tank role, and then perhaps Karayan as the backup, or maybe they'll play Karayan and Gargoyle together. But it remains to be seen for the Florida Mayhem. If I was to say anything, I think they're lacking a little bit. They could do with another tank and another support, but this is up to the Florida Mayhem and them to sort out, really. But there are 2 new players in the off-season, and this is where it gets super duper interesting, because their 2 new players are Yaki and Gangnam Jin. Now, if you know your contenders, and you know your Korean contenders especially, you'll know Yaki and Gangnam Jin from Runaway. So, Runaway, obviously, you should all know about Runaway because basically it's Vancouver Titans. Runaway have an incredible knack of creating really good Overwatch players. I don't know whether anyone's noticed. Runaway and Flowervin do a very, very good job of creating players that go on to be in the Overwatch League. We've seen it with the Vancouver Titans' entire roster, basically. And look where they were last season. Runaway, again, has been kind of raided in the off-season, and 2 of them have found their way to the Florida Mayhem. Not just players, though. We'll get onto that in a minute. But this is like, these are really good signings for the Florida Mayhem. I can't stress that enough. So, Yaki is a DPS player. He's only 18 years old, and he's got really good picks that will complement the likes of Saya player. So he's got the Doomfist, he's got the Hanzo, he's got the Pharah, he's got the Genji. He's definitely going to be the projectile specialist for the Florida Mayhem in this coming season. He can also run out a Tracer if needed. Yaki is an extremely good signing because if, you know, with any shadow of a doubt, I would have thought the Florida Mayhem's DPS will be Yaki and Saya player. Unless they want double projectile DPS maybe, then they might play BQB and Yaki. But I would imagine Yaki and Saya player are going to be the DPS of Florida Mayhem this season. And that is a very nice DPS line. Very much an upgrade to what they had before. And, you know, it can rival some of the best DPS in the league when they pop off. So that's really good for the Florida Mayhem. And then we get Gangnam Jin. Now Gangnam Jin is a slight bit older compared to the rest of the Runaway roster that kind of has been split up now. But he's 21 and he's definitely like this main / off support. He's got the Ana and Zen in his back pocket. And he is a really good signing as well. So Gangnam Jin was kind of like the backbone of that Runaway support line. And he's a really, really good player. He's really, really good. And honestly, I was surprised when Florida picked him up. Simply because I thought he'd go to a better team. No offense, Florida. no offense, you know. But I thought Gangnam Jin could be at one of the best teams in the league. And you know, when Florida were signing these players, that's not what they were, obviously. So, very interesting and kind of a coup for Florida Mayhem to sign these two Runaway players. And definitely changes the dynamic for this Florida Mayhem team. If this Florida Mayhem team can't pop off with the players it's got now, I don't think it ever will. So, this is a really, really good look for the Florida Mayhem right now. In terms of who they will play Gangnam Jin alongside, obviously they've got Byram and Chris. So, Chris is the Mercy Zen Lucio player, Byram's the Zen Ana Moira. I would have thought Gangnam Jin will replace Byram and they will play Gangnam Jin alongside Chris. Unless they make another signing before the season starts, obviously. That would be where I would be thinking right now. But again, I don't know what the Scrims have been doing. I don't know what they've planned in their brains because they've got some new coaching staff as well. Obviously, there's some transfers out to go through. Actually, quite a few. There's 5 transfers out at the moment. So Hagapun came in for the Florida Mayhem. He was at the London Spitfire previously as well. Didn't really do as expected. I thought they might hold on to Hagapun actually. I thought he can be good. And he did play a bit for the London Spitfire and look fairly decent when he played for them. So I was kind of surprised when they let Hagapun go. They let Rain go, he's now with the Los Angeles Valiant. They let Zephyr go, the tank player, he's now unassigned. DPI, the flex player, went to Lucky Future. And Swan, the main tank player, has now become unassigned after leaving the Florida Mayhem as well. So then we look at their organisation. And again, some changes have happened. So Bare Hands, the Assistant General Manager, Head of Scouting, has left. KH1, the Assistant Coach, has left. Rue, the Analyst, has left and has gone to Revival, actually, in Contenders NA. And in Korean, Mulan, the Translator and Assistant Team Manager, has also left. This has made room for some very interesting acquisitions in the coaching lineup for the Florida Mayhem, though. So their new head coach is Kuki. Now Kuki, you will know from the Overwatch League actually. He did have time with Seoul Dynasty and Los Angeles Valiant as a player, main tank. Actually a really good main tank actually at Los Angeles Valiant. I think he did play a Lucio. I think he did get dragged into the support role at times. But he was actually a really decent main tank. He was MVP space before he was in the Overwatch League. And he retired after leaving the Los Angeles Valiant and he became a coach at, yes, Runaway. So he's got a lot of experience with the very, very best, and he comes in with obviously the 2 Runaway players, and I think this is really good for stability in the Florida Mayhem, something that Florida Mayhem have lacked in previous times. So I think this is a really, really good move for the Florida Mayhem. To nick Kuki from his role in in Runaway, which he actually hadn't been in for that long, is really good. And obviously they've seen a lot of potential in him as a coach to promote into the Overwatch League so quickly, although we have seen some people move straight into coaching roles after retiring. So This is a really good acquisition, and also they brought in Docs as an assistant coach as well to work alongside him. He was at MVP Space previously. After a little bit of time out, he left MVP Space in May, and he's spent a little bit of time out, and now he's come in with the Florida Mayhem and Kooky. So I think this will be very interesting for the Florida Mayhem. I think there's a lot of potential, and I said this with the Dallas Fuel yesterday. I think this team has the possibility of going toe-to-toe with the best. Especially with these new players coming in, Yaki and Gangnam Jin, who could really enable the other players to pop off. I really believe there is skill in this roster. We saw it from Gargoyle at the end of last season. We've seen it from Sire Player before. So I think the DPS lineup for the Florida Mayhem is really good. I think the support lineup is fairly decent, depending on whether they sign anyone else and if Chris can work alongside Gangnam Jin well. And then if they can get the best out of Fate, we have seen really good tank play from Fate before, and Gargoyle, obviously we've talked about as well, can be a really good off tank. I think there's a lot of potential in this Florida Mayhem roster. And obviously, we can't leave the Florida Mayhem without talking about the colour change. Obviously, we are now in the Miami Vice era of the Florida Mayhem instead of the McDonald's era of the Florida Mayhem. I think we're all very happy that the Florida Mayhem have decided to ditch the yellow and red and go with the pink, blue and black, and sometimes white. And I think it looks really, really good. I'm really, really happy with the Florida Mayhem recolor. And to be quite honest, it's definitely the best recolor out of the 3 we've had. God help us when we get to the Los Angeles Valiant. That's all I'm saying. But the Florida Mayhem will kick off their season on Saturday, February the 15th. They start off in Philadelphia, where they will play the Houston Outlaws and the Philadelphia Fusion. It will be very interesting because Houston Outlaws is a team that have significantly improved in this off-season as well. Philadelphia Fusion, that's going to be a fun preview when we get to it, because the nerf to Doomfist that has gone up on the PTR very, very recently has changed the outlook on some of the transfers at the Philadelphia Fusion. I'm sure you can get who I'm on about. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to do a preview of. And then the Florida Mayhem will next be in action after that in week 4, where they will travel to the Houston Outlaws homestand, where they will take on the London Spitfire and the New York Excelsior. So they are kind of thrown in at the deep end. We don't know what to make of the London Spitfire right now. I don't think anyone does. New York Excelsior should be good, as they always are. So there's a lot of unknowns going into the season. It's hard to say, well, if you look back at the 2019 season, you would have looked at Florida Mayhem, perhaps with this upgraded roster, and said they could probably beat the Houston Outlaws, they could probably beat the Philadelphia Fusion, they've got no hope against New York, and it's going to be a tight one against London. But this season it could be all different. Florida Mayhem could go and lose all of the first 4 of their games, or they could go in and actually stun them all. So very hard to predict this season, and it's going to be interesting to see a lot of people's power rankings, because I think they're going to be very varied, because it's very hard to predict some of these teams. London Spitfire, Florida Mayhem, Philadelphia Fusion in some respects, Houston Outlaws, Dallas Fuel. There's a lot of teams that are very hard to predict going into the 2020 season of the Overwatch League, which should make it very exciting. But I'm going to leave it here for the Florida Mayhem. Next up, alphabetical order, obviously, we move to China, and it's Guangzhou Charge up next. Guangzhou Charge is going to be an interesting one. Yeah, it's going to be probably a quicker one than these ones have been, because there's less going on at the Guangzhou Charge than there happened at the Florida Mayhem and the Dallas Fuel. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.